Hey, good morning, everybody. As always, really good to be with you. And last week in our Vital Signs series, we just took a little bit of time. We just grappled with these truths that, look, we're not crazy when we experience anxiety, when we even have full-blown anxiety, when we're experiencing panic attacks. We're not crazy, and we're not alone. We're not crazy, we're not alone, and there is a way forward in this. And so really, I heard lots of stories about people just finding a little bit of hope in that, in the Spirit prompting and stirring hope in us. And so grateful for that. Today, we want to go a little further in that conversation, specifically around the issue and the reality of anxiety. And again, it's a common thing, right? And it's not new to us. Even in the Bible, people are experiencing anxiety. David in the Psalms a lot of times uses vocabulary that today we would label anxiety. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament even just called it out, like, don't be anxious. And part of what he's trying to do is help people who on some level must have been experiencing anxiety, right? So it's not new to us. We're just trying to find the steps and stride of Jesus as we navigate it. And so today, I'm really excited because I want to introduce you to a couple friends who are going to help us in this conversation. And we often talk about, hey, we really value Jesus-centered counseling, and we refer lots of people, and lots of you are engaged in that and continue to applaud that and celebrate it. Good for you. And today I want to introduce you to just a couple of those people that we've referred lots of people to. There's a whole group of counselors on our resources page, and I want to introduce you to two of them today. First is Jansen. And so Ann is a phenomenal, absolute gift to so many people. She launched her own counseling practice called The Dwelling Place, leads a really significant women's ministry in the Grand Rapids area called The Well. And the only challenge, the only drawback to Ann is not enough hours in the day to counsel enough people. Okay, so we wish we could send lots more to her, but she's an absolute gift. Ann, thanks a ton for being with us today. Really a gift just to have you and have some of your perspective here. And then Kenney. So Matt, I was thinking just before this that we go back a decade now, which feels a little bit crazy. We go back a decade now, and Matt was actually part of Journey Church for a little bit, him and his family. Matt started his counseling practice in Journey Church, and he leads now is the director of Journey Christian Counseling, which is not connected to Journey Church, other than the fact that we're friends. Journey Church is a friend of Journey Christian Counseling. And and Matt also is on staff at Crossroads Church, and for a long time, a decade plus, probably has led really significant men's retreats, helping men to find healing and freedom and more wholeness of life. And so that's a really significant piece of Matt's ministry as well. So thanks, Matt. It's good to be with you, friend. Good to have you along for the ride. So let's talk about this common reality just of anxiety. One thing I'd just love to ask you to start, you sit with people days on end and have spent years now sitting with people. It just feels like the reality is that the issue of anxiety is growing. More and more of us struggling with it, experiencing it. What's contributing to that? I mean, is it true? Do you feel it like more? And what's some of what's contributing to that? It feels like it's across all ages. It feels like it's, what do you think? What's some of your hunch?
All right, I'll start. I think if I'm correct, I read recently that anxiety is now the #1 diagnosed medical condition in the world.
Wow.
Which is, man, that's interesting. I think there's many things that contribute to anxiety, and I think it's important to remember that. And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit today, but anxiety is actually my body doing what it was designed to do. I have alarm systems built into my body, just like you put a fire detector in your home. And so the fact that I have alarm systems in my body, that's how God created us. I think the thing with anxiety is it's how do I respond to the alarm systems that are in my body. And I think there's a lot of things in this world. I mean, the world can be a scary place. And so there's a lot of things in the world, whether it's through, media or film or just the things that we're witnessing on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes I think we've gotten to a point where our perception of the world, the things that we perceive as threats, rather than just things that we notice, that our body's telling us to just pay attention to, give us almost like a hyper awareness. And I do think too that many moons ago, I was a school teacher, right? So I have grown up as a school teacher, like moving into being a pastor and a therapist, also raising my own children. I see some of the characteristics of the environments that our kids are raised in now and how different they are from when I was a kid. And I think sometimes some of the accommodations that we've made in raising our kids oftentimes maybe make us a little bit less resilient to some of the things that are out there. And I'm not saying that as an indictment. I'm saying that as me, like I've done that. And so I think that like in helping to kind of train up our generations to deal with things that are out there, we've probably done some things that have made that a little more challenging.
It's a great point, right? I mean, it feels none of us are claiming to be perfect at it, right? But it's definitely a reality in there where what have we done to contribute, even accidentally. So, what do you think, True? Like just more and more people, and what do you think that is?
Yeah, I think, when I talk to clients, anxiety and depression, right? They often go together, different heads of the same coin. And like Matt said, anxiety, depression, they've been really pathologized in our culture, where you go, you get a diagnosis and things like that, and that can be very appropriate. But like Matt said, it's really our brains, our nervous systems doing what they were designed to do. And so anxiety, that experience in our body of anxiousness, is our brain saying, like, something's wrong, I'm not safe. And depression being the brain is saying, I'm so tired, right? And so we can see how these go together. High alert, and then I'm so tired. And when we look at our culture, specifically here in the West, we are inundated with threat. We are inundated with things are not right. And so it makes sense that our nervous systems are interpreting things this way. And it matters a lot how we respond to the messages our body, our brains are sending us. In Christian culture too, while maybe not pathologized, anxiety, depression can be made into primarily a spiritual issue. And while, maybe there is doubt, right? Maybe there is that. It's not primarily a spiritual issue. And so I think we have to look at it holistically and the effects of the constant influx of information, the reality that, like, Jesus told us that this is going to be hard and there's going to be trouble and things are going to get worse before they get better. And so then, how do we respond to that is a really important question.
That's really good. I want to go on one little rabbit trail here for a second. I'm really glad you brought in depression. Right, these always seem paired up, right? And one of the dynamics is it feels like, again, from a very layman, uneducated way of talking about this, anxiety gets us at this fever pitch, right? Run, and then the depression is that low key. I'm always tired. It feels like a little bit sometimes we respond to the anxiety, and the result of kind of trying to get out of that is you can actually swing the pendulum to the other side, and then you're in the depression. You went from fever pitch to almost so flat that you don't want to go back to the anxiety, but you also don't want to live this flat. How do we process some of that? Like, how do we navigate finding not just the removal or lessening of anxiety, but finding the health zone again? Again, it's a really uneducated way to ask the question, but does it make sense? Can we go there a little bit?
Sure. Like what you're describing, we talk about this all the time because we have this thing called the window of tolerance that we talk about. It's a kind of a concept that was built by psychologist and author Dan Siegel, and it's this idea that we all have kind of this optimal window that we operate in.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, so anxiety oftentimes would be when I pop way up outside of that window.
Yeah.
Depression is when I go way down below that window. I think sometimes we forget that it is totally normal to have ups and downs within that window. Like when good things are happening, when I'm excited about something, it's totally normal for me to get to the top of that window.
Yeah.
When hard things or I experience loss, it's totally normal for me to get near the bottom of that window. And so sometimes I think, how can I say this? We have a tendency to panic or overreact when we feel the ups and downs that are inside that window. And that's challenging. And I think sometimes when like the analogy you gave a minute ago of like, I can only stay up for so long before I come down. And if I'm not practicing some healthy rhythms within the window, I think that our tendency is going to be to go way up or way down. So I would say, for me, the biggest thing in terms of not doing that hard swing, it's not how do I deal with it in the moment as much as it's what is my practice? What is my practice that keeps me navigating the healthy ups and downs within that window of tolerance or within that optimal range? So it's things like, what am I doing on a day-to-day basis to be healthy, for my brain, my body, soul, and spirit, to be healthy so that I can navigate the ups and downs of life.
That's really good. That's really good. And we were talking before we started about he was polished. There it was,
I
right?
told
there
you.
It was.
I told you.
That was it. That's
I know.
really. That's,
I'm old.
I'm
Not
old.
polished,
Yeah.
I'm old.
It's really helpful. Just that window and what are the healthy rhythms inside of that. Because there is going to be some up and down.
Sure.
And that's helpful just to see a little bit. I want to talk just for a second around anxiety and what feels to me like some of your sweet spots. So, Matt, for years, you've had really significant ministry to men, and that's been your passion. And you've got real passion and significance and real impact with ministry to women. And it feels to me like younger people as well. And so I'd love to just talk around a little bit, like, what do you see in anxiety? What are the commonalities among men especially, and how do we respond to that a little bit? And then, Ann, if you could talk just a little bit, women and maybe younger, next generation, things like, what do we do with some of that?
I think with guys, so I think a lot of times with uncomfortable emotions, which fear and anxieties are, I think with uncomfortable emotions, if we're not handling them in a healthy way, we tend to go one of two directions, or maybe sometimes we go both directions. We either repress or we attach, right? We become addicted to something to help either numb or soothe that emotion or to just bury it. And I think what I experience a lot of times from men, I think there certainly is there are a lot of guys out there who I don't want to deal with my uncomfortable emotion because I don't want to show weakness. So I'm just going to bury it. I'm going to repress it because there's all kinds of messages out there in society of what it would mean about me if I actually step into this and I'm honest about it. So repression of emotion is certainly a problem at times. But I also, sometimes I think about kind of almost of an involuntary repression or a unknowing, like I just don't know it. Because I think for guys, many of us, me included, were not raised with a vocabulary, with a well-developed vocabulary around emotion. I never talked about my emotions growing up. It wasn't even a category that I thought in growing up. And so I get to my, adult years, up through school, adult years, and I'm experiencing these things. And really the thing that I need to do the most is feel it and face it and talk about it. I don't even know how. Yeah. And so sometimes with guys, it's just helping us find some vocabulary around it. I think on the other end with the addiction piece, I think another way that I see a lot of guys dealing with their anxiety is just I'm going to do whatever I need to do to just not feel it. Whether it's I'm just going to perform, I'm going to work, I'm going to numb. So I pop another pill, take another drink, flip on the computer, like whatever it is I need to do just to numb it, so I don't have to deal with it. So I think I see both of those things present, and I mean both of those things are present within women too, but I think sometimes they present differently.
And just before we go, Matt, I want to just drill on one thing there. So again, we're making really sweeping statements, right? But if with men specifically, what's just one way that we unlock a little bit of that vocabulary? What's one way? Again, the easy thing for us to say on everything would be go to a counselor, right? Which we encourage in sport. But what's one way, maybe especially in church life and small group life and community life or inside of family, what's one way we just start to unlock a vocabulary?
Yeah, I'm really big on helping guys kind of locate emotion within their body. So even to say when somebody's like displaying something and you can see there's just something going on, like, can you put your hand at the place in your body where you're feeling this right now? Whether it's, I feel tightness in my neck, in my chest. I feel it. I feel it in my gut. And then we just take a few minutes and say, can we just name what that is? And sometimes, I needed this as I kind of started to step into this world a lot of years ago. I have this little chart that I keep in my counseling office all the time. That's just a chart of feeling words. And sometimes it's just pick up that chart and just tell me which one hits home for you. Read through all these words. And it's almost like almost every time you find something on there that's like, oh, that's it. Right? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling, angry. Whatever it is, and then you just start to talk. Well, what's underneath that? Where's that coming from? And so, just helping with that process of naming, sometimes is really helpful.
My husband was just flabbergasted to learn that there was a list that included more than one word of angry. The fact that there were there's a list of feeling words, because all I know is mad. So I totally echo the feelings list.
I mean, what a great way to it makes a lot of sense, right? Resource it, because it's hard to create them out of nowhere. So you that's brilliant. That's really good. And talk to us just about kind of women, some of the common denominators.
Absolutely. So another word kind of for what Matt's talking with repression in men is that like superhuman power that not a lot of women have, called compartmentalization. Maybe you've heard that like men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. One of the things I see in women is emotions aren't a thing that they can set aside. They very much experience it as the entirety of their existence. So when they're anxious, it affects every part of them. And I think it's the same with the younger generation, because they're in this process of figuring out who they are. And when they experience a big emotion like anxiety or fear, it feels like everything that they are. And so it impacts, work, parenting, school. It kind of leaks into all the places where sometimes for men, we don't see that quite manifest the same. And so in my work with women, and also younger, the kids, I work at differentiation. This idea that God didn't create us single-minded. So like in the Bible, when the centurion says to Jesus, I believe, help me in my unbelief, there's, well, a part of me believes and a part of me doesn't. And so for women, saying like a part of me feels anxious. It's not all of me, because my spirit-led self, when I'm centered, calm, curious, courageous, connected, that part of me is secure. But there's another part that's really anxious. It gives us just enough space from what we're experiencing, so it doesn't have to be the entirety of our experience. And I think for women, you know, like we feel crazy, right? Because it is just affecting everything. I use the metaphor of the bus, right? Like ideally, a school bus, we want our spirit-led self driving the bus. And anxiety gets up from the back and hijacks it and is driving, and it's crazy and it feels out of control. But in reality, with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit in us, we do have capacity to remain in the driver's seat while validating, accepting the anxious part as well.
That's good. That'll preach. That, Go back online, watch that one again, friends. That's really good. That's really, really good. Even that, like seeing that passage that way, the centurion subject, part of me believes, part of me doesn't. Like, that's just really good, really helpful. I say, there's a lot of hope in that, a lot of permission to acknowledge it and have some hope in that. That's really good. I have so many other things I want to ask. But I want to tell you a perception I have, and you can tell me if my perception's wrong. If you think my perception is even marginally right, can you help us know what to do with it? It feels to me like on a lot of issues, but anxiety being one of them, the trend culturally is to not just acknowledge it, identify it, try and deal with it, but to allow it or give it permission to actually become our identity. We take it on as this is who we are. That feels so common, almost so normal, but then clearly is diluting, distracting, diminishing from our identity as children of God, friends of Jesus. Is my perception right in what you're seeing, people you're engaging with? And if it is, how do we pull that back apart and get back to kind of identity is who Jesus says we are, and that actually can help with anxiety. So just talk to us about that a little bit. Anne, you want to start on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it kind of goes back a little bit to what I've said. Oftentimes, I think my clients get a little frustrated because I'm constantly correcting their identity statements, right? Like I'm so stupid, I'm so whatever, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm like, I feel this. I'm like, a part of me feels this. You know, I think culturally, fueled by social media, pop psychology is a real thing right now, right? We are in a mental health crisis, and we're seeing that play out on TikTok, Instagram, all of these things. And we're also in a culture that is like wildly accepting. And so to say, I am anxiety, like to own that as our primary identity, our culture is looking for that to be like empowering, right? We can like, where as Christians, holding on to the truth of like our spirit-led self, our part that is connected with God, seeking His will, finding our true identity in Him, that's our core. And so just that differentiation, but I think we live in a culture that is always going to try to sway that core identity in one way or another, whether that's, you know, into sin or not. You know, we could talk ad nauseum about all the different things, right? And so as Christians, I think an important part of what we do is differentiating our true identity in Christ from the things that we are experiencing.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think what Anne's highlighting, it's actually, like, I think about it in terms of just what is our worldview.
Yeah.
Like, I think if we hold a biblical worldview, Jesus tells us, you're going to experience this stuff, right? You're going to have hard things. There's going to be things to fear in this world. There's going to be things that are going to make you react. And I think, if we're looking at things from a biblical worldview, we're saying, like, our place in this world as renewed, redeemed followers of Jesus is not to specialize in avoiding all of the things that make us afraid or accommodating all the things so that nobody gets disappointed and nobody gets hurt and nobody's angry with us or whatever. And I think that flies in the face of this idea that no, like your place in this world is to develop a deep and abiding trust in me and who I've created you to be, and the way we're gonna renew this world is when we step into that. And so I get nervous sometimes about the ways in which we accommodate everything, because that just doesn't line up, right? It doesn't line up. So
it's really good. I've never heard anybody say that way. I get nervous about how much we're accommodating, but I'm with you in that it scares me sometimes. It's like this can't lead us to a very good place. So so we've covered a lot of things. I want to ask you one last question. The reality is there is goodness in the hope of the gospel, right? And Prophet Isaiah said, look, God's doing a new thing. Like, there is a new way forward, right? And so for a lot of us today experiencing anxiety, it's like, okay, what's my one new thing? What even in this discussion did the Spirit prompt in my life to say, okay, I gotta just take a step into that. What would you say, though, to those who are living with somebody in some of the deepest throes of anxiety, or they're somebody in their friend group, or what's just one thing you'd both offer to say, this is one way to potentially be helpful in an arena that oftentimes it just feels really hard to be helpful. And for those of us who might be in the middle of anxiety, it's hard to know what is helpful too. We don't know what we need for help. So what could, just give us some wisdom on that.
I mean, the first thing for me is I think I'm prone to believe that when somebody really is struggling, that there's something I can say that will fix it for them. And years ago, one of my mentors just said, you have to stop believing that you can talk somebody out of this. And
wow.
And so I think with anxiety, with the type of not just the anxiety that helps me be alert and perform, but the anxiety that really debilitates us.
Yes.
I think we have to remember that you can't talk somebody out of it. It requires a ton of patience. It requires a ton of being with somebody in a very uncomfortable space, and managing what that's doing to you. Because most of the time, if I'm with somebody who's struggling with severe, debilitating anxiety, my propensity to want to move them out of that has more to do with me. This is uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, sure.
And so, or more to do with, I got to be the right thing, say the right thing, do the right thing, so I got to perform. And so a lot of times I just would say, like, you can't talk somebody out of anxiety. And you have to manage what anxiety does to you when you're in the presence of somebody who's really struggling. Because if I seek to just take care of me in that and avoid the uncomfortable feelings that are happening inside of me, I'm likely to wound that person,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
be of any help.
Yeah.
In
That's
that
really
moment.
good.
So,
Yeah,
That's really good.
absolutely. Trying to talk someone out of their anxiety, right? Like if anxiety is a part of us that really believes that there's something wrong, right? If our brain and our thoughts are convinced that there's something wrong, and we try to minimize or dismiss that in someone who's experiencing it, that can be very escalating,
Yeah.
right? Because it feels then like, well, you don't see it, you don't get it, you don't. I'm alone in this, and it makes it so much worse. Matt has described the process of being with someone as, I hear you,
yeah.
I understand, this makes sense. It makes sense to me that you feel afraid,
Yeah.
that you're worried about this. And I'm happy to be with you in it. Instead of moving them out of it. The very simple process of moving toward and validating
Yeah.
can really disarm
Yeah.
someone's experience.
Yeah.
That's
So
so
good.
good because
Yeah.
and not just because you said
He said it, so of course it's good.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that it's so good because my tendency is to always want to go to, how do I fix this?
Yep. Yeah. Same.
How do I fix this? And the fact is when somebody's in that place that Anne's describing, like, you can't.
There's no fixing.
You can't fix it.
No.
And so, in actuality, my attempts to fix it are probably going to make it worse
Yeah.
if they don't feel seen and heard,
Yeah.
if they don't feel understood.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I think about is with somebody who, if you're with somebody who's struggling, I have a tendency at times to think that I know the answer, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's somebody who's close to me, I've seen you struggle before,
Yeah.
or I know your story,
Yeah.
so I know what's going on here. And I think that one of the things that I've just had to learn as a pastor and a therapist is that person is probably going to be way more impacted through an encounter with the Lord
Yeah.
than they are just hearing something from me.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, like, my hope in those times is that we can not rush so quickly past this, that we can create some space here, that where this person is going to actually begin to learn what it means to, face what they're feeling and actually bring it,
Yeah.
pay attention to it and bring it to the Lord.
Yeah.
And not expect that Anne or me or whoever else they're
Yeah.
meeting with is going to be the thing
Yep.
Yeah.
that's going to fix them. I think
It's really
I
good.
have a
It's really
tendency
good.
to want to be the regulator for everybody.
Yeah.
Just let me regulate your emotions,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
right? And ultimately, like, yes, there is a certain level of trust that needs to be present with a therapist or a pastor and the person they're meeting with. But ultimately, what I want to do is I want you to trust me enough that we can create some space together so that you can actually learn how to trust God more with this and not just look for the silver bullet, right? From someone that maybe has been down this road a few times.
Absolutely.
We don't have any silver bullets.
Right.
Jesus is always the answer. So creating that space is super important.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really, really good. Again, I wish I could just ask like a dozen more questions. That's really good, and you've kind of gotten us to a really helpful place to say, okay, like there's a way. Like if we're the helper, there's a way like to do that well and in a healthy way. If I'm experiencing some anxiety that's at a debilitating level, if I'm starting to maybe think that I am, what's one step? Like what's maybe one thing I heard today? If I'm trying to just be with somebody in it. what's one thing that maybe the Spirit would stir in my heart and in my mind today to say we could be helpful in that. So Matt and Ann, thank you tons for being here and being with us today.